The future of content is here, and it may surprise you. Let's listen to David and Nilla. They will talk about how you can connect with publishers to really drive your commerce business. How do you actually work with first-party affiliate data and how you make it all work in sync? This is a great session if you want to work with content, but obviously also want to drive your sales up. The stage is yours, David and Nilla.
All right, Neela, let's set the stage. When we look at why people go online, you and I were talking earlier and thought we could really just break it down into three things, generally speaking. They're looking for entertainment, they're looking for information and connections with other people. And they're finding one or more of these things from digital publishers and other content creators. These can include creators on other major social platforms, as well as, for example, the Meredith and Condé Nast properties, and with independent publishers. Neela, you're an SVP of Commerce at BuzzFeed, one of the top independent publishers out there. What type of content, generally speaking, does BuzzFeed publish?
I think the great thing is kind of a little bit or a lot of bit of all three of those areas that you said consumers are typically looking to get out of the content that they consume. We do a ton of entertainment content spanning anywhere from like what to watch, what to eat, what to shop. But we're also known for our BuzzFeed quizzes, which is kind of the DNA of what made BuzzFeed what it is. We obviously have our BuzzFeed News division as well, where we have journalists who are dedicated to serving our audience truth about the things that should matter to them. So BuzzFeed kind of spans many purposes for our users, but the focal point of what my day-to-day is focused on is our shopping vertical. And that is content that helps our users know where to shop and what to shop. So we have a dedicated team of writers who are curating products. Typically those are in post format. Sometimes those show up in a video, they show up on social. And really the focus of what I do is how can I help our content teams create more of that content to service our audience and to drive transaction for our affiliate partners.
Okay, so it sounds like a mix of information and entertainment content with even a bit of social engagement connections kind of built into it. And if I got it right, the commerce-driven information that people are engaged with publishers might include fashion trends, for example, reading or watching reviews on a product, looking for pricing or even savings information on a purchase. Sounds like they're basically shopping in this case, which I want to unpack with you more in just a minute. But I'm curious, how does your team source ideas essentially for what to create? How do you decide what content to publish?
Yeah, so we have an editorial team. We've been doing our commerce business for about 4+ years at this stage. So a lot of our strategy that we're developing today is using historical data from what we've seen really work over the past 4 years. With that said, COVID very much kind of taught BuzzFeed and many publishers that consumer behavior is always prone to changing and evolving. And we couldn't necessarily rely as much on seasonal data or historical data last year. So we were very closely kind of almost looking internally and saying like, what are we shopping as consumers right now? And also looking at macroeconomic trends, thinking about things like people are working from home. How can we create content around those specific categories in terms of literally editorial process? Where our writers are very unique is they very much try to create content through the lens of the consumer. So they effectively shop online. They shop at the retailers, again, that they have an affinity towards or that we know our audience has an affinity towards. And they really look for products that are well-reviewed, that they have experience with, or that generally is product that they think really aligns with those kind of thematic categories that we know our audience is looking for. So it's very much like an organic process, but it very much is also rooted in data and the historical data that we have. So it's this kind of true marriage of, I would say, like in art and science.
Okay, very interesting. We always hear about how big Facebook and Google are, for example, as platforms for advertising. I'm sure the audience would be interested in just understanding the size and the scale that BuzzFeed, but as well like the addressable market in digital publishing in general. Could you give us a sense of your size, and then maybe any anecdotes about the digital publishing market as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking to our own business, it has very much kind of had compounding year-over-year growth since we initially launched our affiliate business. Last year was really when we saw this upswing of obviously digital shoppers, given the effects of the pandemic. So what we saw on our end was that we drove 500 million in GMV for the partners that we feature through our content. I think one important thing to level set is that 500 million in GMV is really kind of rooted in last click attribution. So that's people who click through a piece of content and ended up purchasing. It's not necessarily accounting for the many people who saw our content and maybe made a purchase, but we didn't necessarily have those attributable sales. In terms of scale, from a traffic perspective, our shopping content consistently has over 60 million views to our content on a monthly basis. So definitely significant views. There's seasonality to that. Being Q4 is obviously kind of the Super Bowl of retail, and publishers very much lean into that in a big way. In terms of the more kind of overall size of the pie, obviously the affiliate space is a massive industry. From what I've anecdotally heard from the networks that we work with, the content publishers are gaining more and more of a share of that pie. I don't want to speak to specific numbers, and I'd say you probably have a better sense of this, but I definitely, from what the conversations I have both with advertisers and our network partners, we very much are recognizing that over the past year, there's been a huge shift in advertisers looking to publishers as a serious part of their affiliate channel. And again, it's capturing more of the pie than it had in the past.
Okay, so I think we've established we've got a critical mass here that brands should be fully engaged with if they're looking to create awareness, drive customer acquisition, for example, especially considering that Google, Facebook, Amazon together are getting well over 90% of the new digital ad dollars today, which I think overshadows some of the important trends and opportunities with major publishers and content creators like yourself who have an engaged audience. So let's talk then about the business of publishing. I know you're passionate about creating great content. You have a strong relationship with your audience to keep coming back to your properties, but you're also a business. So you need to drive revenue in order to be able to continue publishing content at scale. Could you maybe take us through the journey of the primary ways in which digital publishers like BuzzFeed, but also what you've seen from other publishing brands like CNN, People, or Vogue, what have been some of the key strategies you and other publishers have adopted to make a business out of digital publishing over the last 10 years, let's say? I mean, if I go way back, but even now still, I think about the email blast, the pop-ups, takeover ads, banner ads that follow me around from site to site, basically a lot of disruptive ad tactics. What have been your observations from over the past number of years just making a business out of publishing?
Yeah, so I would say the business of publishing is really monetizing your audience's attention. And I think that's what the kind of publisher space has always anchored their strategy around. BuzzFeed was a unique player, given it's obviously a digital publisher, so we didn't have a print business, which a lot of our competitors obviously were monetizing in that way. But our business, and again, this predates me, but was really anchored in this concept of native or custom content. So knowing that BuzzFeed has this kind of unique relationship with our audience, we know how to drive not only views, but actual engagement and shares. We effectively created a business allowing our advertisers to use our editorial and content expertise to create content that helps them engage with their audience in kind of a way that is very differentiated from their own channels. Our business has obviously evolved over time, and now we are kind of leveraging similar monetization channels like other publishers, being display advertising or programmatic advertising. Affiliate and commerce is a huge part of, again, how we're monetizing our audience. But I think I keep hearing this phrase used, and I really like it. It's we're not only monetizing our audience's attention, but we're also kind of monetizing what our audience is actually taking action on through our content. And that action can be anywhere from driving qualified traffic. It can also be the transactions in terms of conversion, which is, again, kind of the space that I'm operating in the most. The interesting thing with my role as of the last almost a year now is I also oversee our retail direct-to-consumer advertising side of our business. So I very much see kind of the two sides of the equation. We have our performance partners who are very much just thinking about how can I maximize the efficiency of my spend with publishers, which oftentimes, again, is not just about monetizing attention, but it's actually ensuring that your campaigns are driving action that ladders into a KPI, be it conversion or qualified traffic. But then beyond that, it's the more, which I think is still valuable, but maybe harder to measure KPIs, being things like brand awareness. We know BuzzFeed has massive scale, an audience is tuned in, an audience who has kind of high intent. And also we are kind of a trusted, credible source. So I think having your products show up within our environment or even show up related to the BuzzFeed brand in a social environment that's where you're really achieving kind of that brand awareness at scale. So I think, again, there's like many kind of traditional channels through which publishers monetize their business. But I think it's more about, I think thinking of it in a simple form is like, we've created premium audiences that we're able to kind of give value to our advertisers by allowing them to live within the environment that those audiences are consuming content, but also to actually use our content expertise and our brand awareness on social to elevate the advertisers that we're working with.
So it seems like integrating it more within the content experience itself, essentially, which is a pretty cool trend. If we look at speeding up to this year, right? There's a lot of big tech changes coming. Apple updating their security settings, doing away with IDFA. Google just outwardly walking away from cookies and retargeting. They're talking about pulling back on next year. How do you see any of these new headwinds to targeting, tracking, measurement affecting digital publishing's ability to monetize content effectively going forward?
I mean, I definitely think it'll bring on headwinds, but I actually do for publishers see it more as tailwinds, in that I think the shifts that are happening in terms of limitations with privacy, it actually further kind of adds value to first party data, which publishers obviously have access to. And not only do we have access to first party data, but our data is proprietary in the sense that we have intent and content consumption signal that I think gets an advertiser closer to a target audience that ultimately will increase their efficiency. So again, there's obviously limitations with what we can do with our data outside of our environments, but I think part of why Facebook is Facebook is they built up these walled gardens, and they limited how much of the data could actually be used outside of their environment. So I think in this situation, it puts more power back in the hands of the publisher. And again, it is unique that we have built up these audiences at scale, and audiences who are coming to us to consume very specific content, to, in my world, kind of shop very specific products or brands or price points. So the fact that we can now kind of leverage this data to add value to our advertisers and really lean into our first party data actually becomes kind of like a tailwind to a lot of the privacy changes that our industry will soon experience.
Okay, so I agree with that. I think, publishers like yourself who have a deeper, more engaged connection with their audience are probably going to benefit from some of the restrictions. Those that have, kind of a more shallow relationship, essentially, are going to have difficulty using data to target, track, measure, etc. If you look at just staying on these eminent trends here in big tech, I personally see it as a response to the attitude change in today's modern consumer. They seem to simply just not trust anything unsolicited today. That includes ads that are surrounding the content and the social connections that really is what they're after. Not to mention, I think they're just annoyed with disruptive tactics from advertisers over the years. And I think they have a lot more options available to them now than ever before for discovering information that they're after, whether it's with BuzzFeed, or it could be an influencer or other content creator. That's where they're finding their information on products, and as well as other content that's entertainment oriented. So I look at it as, people are online for content and connections and not ads primarily. And today's consumers just got, there's a lot more empowered to go out and seek the opinion recommendation from someone else, like a BuzzFeed editor in this case, in the form of information content. And so just not responding to ads in a traditional fashion. So if any of this is true, and I'd love to get your feeling on that perspective, how has BuzzFeed responded to this evolution of the modern consumer?
That's a great question. And I think it also, I definitely think that's true. And I think it comes a lot from kind of the emergence of this digitally savvy audience being Gen Z and millennials. I think they kind of like see through the BS. They know what what publishers are doing, and how they're monetizing their attention. And I think they kind of want that power back. I do think there's a world where we can kind of flip the narrative, and instead of thinking of advertising as disruptive, think about how that inventory can become additive to the experience. So I always say this, like, I don't mind if I'm served an ad and it's a really cute dress that is from like Reformation or Revolve that I actually want to shop. Like, that to me is super helpful. Sometimes obviously creepy, because I'm like, oh, they clearly know kind of what my style is and they're targeting me specifically. But I think if there's ways to either use kind of like implicit signals from users around their preferences and to serve them ads that feel very targeted and personalized, and that help them discover or help the user kind of discover products or discounts or deals or a service that actually is likely to kind of enhance their life or their experience. I do think that's where advertising can be additive to the consumer experience. And I think there wouldn't be this kind of resistance from consumers. I think it's really the big challenge I've seen is a lot of publishers like use that inventory, which is very kind of premium inventory. It's in the consumer space. It's in theory disruptive to what you're wearing or to what you're reading, in a way that's like, it's bad ads. Like the context isn't interesting. It's clearly not personalized. It's just like, it's kind of trying to like shove information in the consumer space. So what we're thinking a lot about at BuzzFeed, and that I'm thinking a lot about in my division, is like, we have that inventory. That's just like the publisher model. It's been created in that way. We know that's where we're getting eyeballs and attention. But how can we lean into media innovation to really think about what could a personalized ad experience look like, and how can we create kind of innovation within the ad units that does feel like something that's like helping the consumer. And something that I'm kind of like the mandate I'm giving my team is to think about everything through like a consumer-centric lens. I guess to give an example of how we're thinking about this is we actually developed a new ad unit that we're calling the trending product ad unit, that actually surfaces our top selling products from our affiliate content in an actual ad unit. And that can be based on retailer, it can be based on our general shopping behavior. And you can imagine that down the line, we might target those ad units to readers who clearly have an affinity for that retailer because they've shopped that retailer before or read the content. So again, I think with innovation, ads could be additive and not disruptive, but I do think it requires a huge shift in how our industry thinks about the purpose of ads in a consumer's journey.
That sounds like a paradigm shift to me. I mean, to be clear, you're not just in the editorial business of reporting the news and creating other information and entertainment content for your readers. You're actually in the business of also creating a bit of a shopping experience, right? When you're covering trends, publishing reviews, rating products and services. I've noticed a similar trend with some other major publishers. CNN's got this new section of their site called Underscored. New York Times has Wirecutter. Condé Nast, Vogue brand, they have a very robust shopping section on their site with editor picks on products, for example, as you're mentioning. So I find this to be a pretty important trend, but it seems like in the past, publishers had drawn a pretty hard line between content and advertising. It seems like those lines are blurring a bit now. How do you then maintain editorial integrity with the content that you're publishing?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I've been in the affiliate space for 6 years. And when I first started, everyone you just named was not necessarily in the affiliate business. And it was exactly that fear of, I think part of it was fear of cannibalizing publishers' core business, and this fear that our content, that publisher content maybe didn't drive the sort of meaningful scale that it actually does. And I think a lot of publishers started dipping their toes in affiliate, testing the waters, seeing the numbers and leaning into it in a bigger way. So I think that is part of the reason for the shift. But the other big blocker that existed back then, and I would say exists till today, is this feeling of like, does affiliate or commerce content start to conflict with that separation of church and state between editorial and business? I think publishers who are doing affiliate right understand that really affiliate is kind of like a self-policing model. And I've used this frame a lot. And what I mean by that is if you are not driving an affiliate business that's truly authentic, where you're making good product recommendations, it's not an affiliate business that's going to kind of have longevity. Part of affiliate too is like, we don't get paid if people return their products or if people have a bad experience and don't come back. So we're very much kind of incentivized to be very authentic. So at BuzzFeed, our affiliate strategy is very much led by the editorial team, but kind of supported by business is the way that I think of it. Where we write about the brands that our editorial team has an affinity towards, or they think our audience will. And we very much kind of use the data to see where there's signal to notice like that brand is really kicking off with our audience. Let's reach out and see what more we can do. So we're kind of like working on the heels of our editorial team. I think every business is obviously operated differently, but I would say like most of the major publishers very much value editorial discretion and integrity beyond all else. And that's why our affiliate businesses are performing as well as they are. And I think if we ever kind of do that at the expense of just one deal or working for one partnership, I think that's very quickly when we'll see our affiliate business kind of on the decline versus on this massive growth trajectory.
I think that's important. I guess if you're going to put the BuzzFeed brand next to the commerce content that you're publishing, for example, top staff product picks, it needs to be authentic, because otherwise you're going to lose your audience over time. Could impact your business over time. So if I understand it right, it seems like there are essentially two routes now for advertisers that are working with major publishers like BuzzFeed today. One is they can buy ads or through a DSP like the Trade Desk, and these are filling ad slots that are essentially sitting outside and around the content that you're publishing. And then secondly, they can work with a separate commerce content team inside of BuzzFeed, almost like a PR firm would, right? Where a business essentially provides you information that you would need to be able to create content about them. If you determine that it's a fit for your audience, how would they engage with you to be included in your commerce content coverage? And how can brands essentially approach you in this way?
Great question. So we actually have a kind of unique model. As I said earlier, I have I oversee our retail direct-to-consumer advertising business as well, where we have sellers that I would say a lot of our media agencies or kind of those more advertising buyers might be familiar with working with. But then I also have my commerce business, who very much is focused on our affiliate business. We are doing our best to make it as easy as possible for advertisers to engage with BuzzFeed. And we do know that there can be kind of like some complexity in like working with two different teams to activate one campaign. And I would say I'm seeing more and more RFPs come in where the ask is performance-driven campaigns, or it's asking for affiliates specifically. So we've really attempted to kind of streamline that process. With that said, we see a lot of value in having this like center of excellence who's really kind of rooted in all things affiliate and thinking about the strategy and constantly thinking about innovation. So when activating with us, through affiliate, it can either be through kind of the sales team that you typically are used to interfacing with, and we have a workflow internally where that sales team knows to tap the affiliate team, or brands can work through our network partners, being Impact or Rakuten or CJ, and they're very much kind of plugged into our affiliate team directly. And kind of the third is if you don't have any existing relationships in place, to reach out to our affiliate team, and I'm happy to kind of provide it, like even just emailing me, like connecting you to the right people to kind of facilitate those conversations. But I think to help give more guidance as to like what that outreach should look like. And I would say this guidance probably stands to be true for any publisher, is making sure to be kind of really pointed with why you think a certain publisher is right for your product or your brand. Being that like we featured you in the past editorially, or you really think your product would be a strong fit for the BuzzFeed audience, providing as much context around your brand itself as to like why it stands out from other competitors, what your product assortment is, your best sellers, or any sort of kind of like recent growth or new product launches that are notable. To your point, kind of similar to like PR outreach in that sense. But then also making it super easy to like outline what network a brand is a part of, and also just like criteria around like what commission rate you can offer, and just the more information upfront is helpful. Publishers receive a lot of inbounds these days because affiliate is taking off. So I think just like figuring out the best way to kind of stand out from the crowd helps streamline those conversations to make sure you're getting connected to the right team.
Okay, so it sounds like it's not as easy as bidding to fill an available ad slot on your site. But besides the obvious better consumer experience these strategies provide compared to disruptive ads, which I think is a step in the right direction overall for the industry, what else would you say are the benefits of this kind of strategy for brands?
From my perspective, it's so funny because to me, so many of my shopping decisions are based on content. And when I say so many, it's like typically 100%. I'm like reading an article or I'm following someone on social. Sometimes it is like a recommendation from a friend, but even after I receive a recommendation, literally the next thing I do is like go to Google, search the product, read articles, and then buy it. So if I was running my own company and I was a CMO, my number one strategy would be getting my product into as many pieces of content as possible. And again, whether it's with trusted publishers, where I would say most consumers go to kind of get that final sense of validation, or be it on social with publishers, influencers, whatever it might be. But I think while it's a strategy that requires like a bit more handholding, to your point, it's not just like passive and dynamic and you can't just kind of hit a button and your ads show up everywhere. It is more of like advocating for your brand to the publishers or influencers that you really want to feature your product and tell the story of your brand in a meaningful way. It definitely is more of like an intentional strategy in that regard, but I absolutely think it's worth it because I strongly believe not only Gen Z and millennials, like I'm seeing it with my own mom, like she'll be like, oh, I read this article and I found this product, and she ends up buying it. Like I do think it's becoming a very core way that consumers shop. So I think it's a huge miss to not kind of take that initiative. And also just, I think a lot of publishers or advertisers being retailers they almost aren't organizationally set up to kind of take on affiliate in as meaningful as a way as they could. And I think that sometimes ends up being the blocker. But to your point, I think like start with a channel where it's like the most natural for, and like whether that's your PR channel or whether that's your custom content channel where you're used to buying content with publishers. And this is just like a more editorial version of it. I think it's a worthwhile endeavor to pursue because the return is certainly there, and we see it with the partners that we work with.
And I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the empowered modern consumer today. They're in control of their buying journey more than ever. They're seeking out research, recommendations. They want to hear what other people, other businesses that they trust have to say about a product or service. And I'm dying to get more feedback in time from you guys as you figure it out and kind of improve your models. Like having BuzzFeed call you out and put their brand next to your business means something, right? There's some brand lift there that is positive. And I know we're going to get more and more accurate measurement feedback as that continues to play out. Maybe a final question here, because I think brands would want to know the answer. Can this strategy for monetization actually scale for both brands as well as publishers like yourself? Can it really move the needle for business?
I absolutely know it can, because it has for many of our partners. And without revealing too many numbers, like during the pandemic, when a lot of brands moved to consider this channel more seriously, we saw growth numbers in the 1,000% year-over-year range, which sounds ridiculous to say, but like we saw those numbers, and that's 1,000% growth on millions of dollars of GMV. So we absolutely see kind of the needle being moved when brands take a concerted effort in developing their affiliate channel and strategy with content publishers. I think to be a little bit more tactical about what that means is, again, given the affiliate channel when working with content publishers is a bit more passive in the sense that you kind of share information about your product and almost hope that writers pick it up or that influencers feature it. Maybe it's more intentional with things like paid affiliate where you're getting guaranteed exposure. But it is a little bit like the fate is out of your hands. But once a publisher does end up writing about a brand, that's kind of where the magic happens. And we've created a model to allow brands to double down on the exposure that they do have with being able to boost their content, meaning distribute that content across social so that it generates more traffic. We have tactics where we can target users who are actually converting on that content. Some of that may change with the new iOS 14 changes, but we very much have figured out a model where we can achieve what you're saying in terms of scale. The value of working with BuzzFeed is like we already have scale. So when we create a piece of content, publish it through our channels, we will receive hundreds of thousands of views, oftentimes on a post. But if I think where the advertisers can have a little bit more control in a way that they would with other advertising channels where there's guaranteed views or impressions or a bit more predictability, we've created new models that allow us almost to use that piece of editorial coverage as like an asset that you can then distribute in more places and drive more qualified traffic to in order to create this flywheel effect that really does achieve, as you just said, meaningful scale and really can move the needle.
Excellent. So much innovation happening here. And one of the things that I'm excited about is just really putting the consumer and their experience more front and center. So really love major publishers like yourself stepping up to offer that type of engagement and experience, especially on behalf of brands. So I think that's it. Neela, I want to thank you for taking time to chat with me today about the latest trends, opportunities in digital publishing and revenue acquisition. I'm Dave Ivano, CEO of Impact. By the way, we're providing technology in this area as well to automate exactly these kinds of partnerships between publishers and creators with brands as well as for their agencies. Thank you.
Thank you so much.